Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Rutherman.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Pentiment, a game that was developed by Obsidian Entertainment and published by Xbox Game Studios, released in 2022 on Windows, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Switch, PS4, and the PS5.
But first, if you can give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
So Pentiment is... There's a couple of things I wanted to start with here. Basic genre, it's a mystery... I don't know why I said that like I was going to say mysterious. It is a mystery adventure game in sort of the point and click family.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of inventory collection, though there is a little bit, but you don't really solve puzzles in that way. It's obviously, I say obviously, the impression I got was that it was going for more of an Obra Dinn sort of like deduction kind of puzzle solving.
Yeah, I'd put it like as like a narrative adventure game, kind of like a Night in the Woods or like Life is Strange, even like in that modern adventure game kind of style.
Yeah, and obviously, like I think an interesting thing about adventure games as like time has gone on, because like before an adventure game, like you had like the LucasArts and the Sierra style, and that's kind of how you imagine a point and click adventure game. As things, and we've talked about this a bunch of times on the podcast, like as they've become more streamlined and there's less of what people consider to be like the annoying part of adventure games, they have also really diversified sort of like the styles of games that encompasses, because this is very different than something like a Cat Lady, but they definitely occupy the same genre and they look kind of similar in terms of like it's on a 2D plane and you like interact with stuff in that way. And I don't know, I've always been a big fan of this style and I like it a lot here as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like when you get rid of that like mechanical baggage of like pixel hunting and stuff. Yeah, it's like more of like a vehicle for a narrative, and you can be more creative with the surrounding gameplay mechanics.
Yeah. And I would say they were at least somewhat creative in this game. I guess there's a couple of things I wanted to hit before jumping right into it. And by a couple of things, there's one big thing. And that is I was talking to somebody about the game like I don't know, a couple weeks ago. In case you hadn't noticed, dear listener, this is a pretty late episode, and we'll probably continue to release late because we have an extremely busy month coming up. But and they were like, "Oh yeah, I heard about Pentiment," and I was like, "That's weird," because like this seems like the kind of game that no one would have heard of. And then I realized that it was developed by Obsidian, who is the developer of like Fallout New Vegas and shit. And that is crazy to me. As somebody who has never played an Obsidian game before in my life, this is my first one. They definitely did not come off as the kind of studio, to my like limited understanding of what they did, that would make a game like this. And then reading further into the history of this was actually even more interesting, because I guess it was like an idea that got floated in like 1993, and it just didn't get made for like almost 30 years. So there's a lot of like weird baggage. But did you expect this to be like a game that people were aware of? Because I really didn't.
I know, like we had this was recommended by a friend of ours, so that's where I heard of it, and like I think I also did hear like some like discussion of it online, like it being name dropped by a few people on like YouTube or something. But no, I do think it's kind of surprising because it does seem really niche. But like I think it might be like what is it? Xbox Game Studios produced it,
right?
Yeah, like, yeah. I think they really promote the games that they publish. It seems like. Like I know like Ori is another one that they published that like, you know, I feel like got a lot of advertisement. So like it might be that, just the money behind it.
That's very well. I would, yeah. I think definitely like somewhere between Microsoft being want to promote their the games that come out of the studios, because they have in recent times bought a lot of studios to make a lot of games.
Yeah, desperately.
Yeah, you got to get the exposure out there. But then also it being from Obsidian, a game that people are like, or a studio that people are generally familiar with. Like, it makes some sense. Like after I took all of that in, but yeah, I definitely didn't expect it to have the reach that it has had. Like, many people listening to this episode will have heard of this game prior to me.
Right. Now, yeah, it's definitely surprising.
But yeah, I don't know. That was like the one thing I wanted to start with, because it was just sort of like a weird experience that I had, like coming in prior to having actually played the game. But beyond that, I think we can talk sort of about how this game is structured. This game is a 3-act adventure game, and each act presents you with a different, well, I'll say crime. It's mostly murders,
right?
Assaults that mostly end in murder.
Yeah, they like escalate.
Yeah, and you play as Andreas Mailer, a like traveling artist who is like doing. So I forget what the name of it is. There's like a name for the pilgrimage he's on.
Yeah, he's like doing like an apprenticeship at this abbey.
Right. And you are, in multiple instances, tasked to solve these murders. Which does beg the question, why? Why him? I never really got a good answer from the game as to why everyone implicitly trusted his abilities. But yeah, that's like central. You have to just understand that is going to happen in order for the game to function at all narratively.
Yeah. I think, they are counting on that, just like, because he's the player character sort of thing. But like, I guess he's like an outsider to the town, and I guess like could be viewed as more like unbiased. And I think like his character does seem to kind of take a personal interest in it. It's like I think he, like in the beginning, I might be misremembering, but I think like he pushes to be the one to investigate more than like people put it on him.
Yeah, that is true. The first murder that happens is 100% like he has like a personal stake in it, and there's an impending like clock that says, if I don't solve this, then somebody who is close to me will take the blame for it.
Right.
So that's the one where it's like, I'm all in, like, sure. And not only that, but they also have a narrative device within the game that's like, you are just giving a testimony.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so the Archdeacon just accepts your testimony, and weighs it, and because nobody else knows fucking anything about anything in the town, it's the one that goes through, and your verdict comes out. But then in the second act, there's just Andreas is just like, oh, hold on, let me do it, and everyone's like, okay. And like they don't really push back at all, which is strange.
Yeah, I guess there's like the town rioting. Like I think like they're accepting any kind of like voice that might stop all hell from breaking loose at that point. Would be my interpretation. He tries to mediate, so they're like, please. Please do.
Yeah, because they can't get over their own selves. But yeah, I don't know. That's the setup, and I was a little surprised. Like, I obviously, as usual, didn't do any research before going into this game. I didn't expect it to be a murder solving game.
Me neither.
And I didn't. Yeah, and I also didn't expect it to be a murder all of the time. I thought that there would be like a different thing that happens in Act 2, and when there was another murder, it took me, like, if I had known going in, like, that was the object, like Obra Dinn, like, if I went in and was like, oh, this is that game where you solve crimes. I feel like I would be less taken aback by it. By going in completely blind and there being a murder like in the second time that you're in the town, I was like, I am surprised by this. Like, I thought they would have gone in a different direction.
I feel like I wasn't that surprised that the murders kept happening, because there's like, they seed that whole there's the handwritten notes with the purple ink. So like
The string puller.
yeah,
or
like I
whatever?
was like, whenever there became an act 2, because I didn't know it was going to be broken up into acts. I was like, oh, like it's going to be that like we didn't catch the real killer, and they're
Right.
still going to be like on the loose, and like it's going to be another murder. We're going to have to like reopen the case. Was like the way I saw the story going. But yeah, like I think we talked about weirdly kind of similarly on the Phoenix Wright episode. We were like, why do all the cases have to be murders? Well, I expected maybe one of them to be something different.
That's a good point. Maybe this is a through line that I wouldn't have expected on the No Clip podcast, is that we're just like, we are bored by murders.
We need more than blood splattered on our faces to keep us from yawning.
Yeah, please splatter some like grand larceny on us or something. Honestly, that may have even been the joke that I made in the Phoenix Wright episode.
It's possible.
Because grand larceny is, I think, the funniest crime to say. So,
You're not wrong.
but yeah, that's sort of like the structure of the game, which, as I said, did take me by surprise a little bit. But it also meant that like the way that I framed how I was playing the game changed a lot in Act 2. And then didn't change a lot in Act 3, because I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't actually finish Act 3. So there was that. In the first act, essentially, like, I was going around sort of I had made it my goal pretty early on to just try and piss off the nobility as much as I could, because it just seemed like a fun thing to do. And it kind of worked out to some extent. But there's a lot of things going on. I think the thing that is most impressive to me, and also the thing that most fucked me while playing the game, was the amount of stuff that is actually sort of like remembered and carried between things.
Right.
I was extremely impressed by how well they managed to string the game together in such a way that like many different choices you make do actually, and not even necessarily choices you make, but like just things that you interact with that you have no way of knowing what like the outcome is going to be, have those things sort of come up in the future. So, and like I could see in different places, like the dominoes falling in different directions. Like I got stuck in the aqueduct. I don't know if you did this in Act 2, and there was an option that I could have screamed and yelled to wake somebody up so that we could escape into the Abbey, but I didn't do it. I instead went back, and therefore I overheard some conversation that ended up being like kind of instructive to solving the second murder.
Right, by
and
the windmill.
the conversation by the windmill. And so it's like you get those like competing things. It's like I could see in that case an instance where I had a choice to make and could have done something else and maybe gotten a different set of information. And it makes you think like, where else did I potentially miss something? So.
Yeah, like I didn't do any like research into it after finishing the game, but like it seems like the narrative really kind of like molds itself around what you do in it. Like I'm pretty sure like it doesn't matter who you accuse of the murder. Like that it's just like kind of like canon that that's who did the murder. But I'm not 100% sure about that, but
yeah, that's the one thing that I was kind of bummed about on me not finishing the game, is because I wanted to know if it kept track and whether or not there was a correct answer.
I don't
but go on.
think that there is. Like I think it's just whoever you accuse is the one who is the murderer. As far as you can tell, anyway. But I was gonna say something else. But yeah, so I do think it's interesting that it manages to like feel like as you were saying, like that possibility space feels really huge. Like every like there will be like one little seemingly insignificant interaction that will then give you some kind of benefit like in a way later conversation, and it's just like
Right.
it's just like the way it all, yeah, like how many balls it has in the air and how much stuff like actually affects other things is like really impressive. So like I feel like that's interesting, like it because it feels like the narrative itself is a little looser and not like super tightly and meticulously written, you know. Like I just think it's interesting how it's all like put together, because it's like a little bit more of like the opposite of what I might expect, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
No, I think it does. Like, there's something we've talked about before, and I'm not going to be able to give a specific episode, but I also think that what I'm saying is kind of self-evident, that like there are a lot of indie adventure games like this with choice-based. It's like choice-based, I think, is like a tag on Steam. Like there are a lot of these games, and a lot of them in the indie space, and doing something that has these like narrative choices in it is actually very complicated, because you need to be able to actually write out the all the different permutations of choices to make, or you have to do clever writing to sort of tie everything back together so that no matter what you do, it all sort of ends up in the same place. This is an example of when you just have the budget to do all of the permutations, or maybe not all of them, but like
A lot of
way
them.
more than I would have expected. Yeah. And I don't know, like normally that wouldn't be a thing that I would be like, hell yeah, we gotta like, I want to see this real bad, but it was cool to see. Like, I'm glad that I got to see a game that really got to go hog wild with its narrative choices.
Yeah, like if we didn't do this podcast and I just had more free time to do whatever, I feel like I would want to replay this, because it feels like it could go like very different on a second playthrough.
Yeah. I have a famous, absolutely famous, all the people in the world know about it. I have a hesitance to replay games. I find that most of the time games that advertise themselves as having a lot of replayability are not. It's not actually worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
This game might be an exception to that. I will go ahead and say right now, I had very close to zero fun playing this game, and would never play it a second time under any circumstances. But I can imagine that if I was more interested in the game, this may be something that breaks it, because it genuinely is very interesting how many paths they managed to fit in here.
Yeah, like one like early on thing that like really like surprised me is like I was like on the way to the Abbey, and it's like the shithead neighbor kid that no one likes.
Martin.
Yeah, Martin like just like runs by you, and like you knock him over or something like that, and like he's like stolen something from the rich guy who's come to town. I can't remember what his name was or his station.
Lorenz something.
Yeah. And it's like how like I just like let him go, and like the amount that hung over my head the rest of the time, like that, because he just runs away and he's just gone the rest of the act. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like I hope that wasn't like really important, like that I just let him go. Like that's I think that's like part like where it like really like the game really sucked me in. Like where when I like realized like, oh, like this game is like really layered.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on, and like that, and this does lead into. I wonder if this is the right time to talk about it, but it does lead into one of the things that I think I said a second ago that I had no fun playing the game, which is accurate, but it doesn't mean that I think that the game is bad. To the contrary, I actually think this is a pretty good game. One of the things though that I just could not like reconcile. One of the things that I think is genuinely a bad decision. The way that they do those. So when Martin runs by you, it brings up a little box and it says like, these are the things that you had to have done in
Oh,
order to
yeah,
get
yeah.
Martin to like stop and talk to you so that you could get information from him in there. And it's like all this shit. And you're like, I mean, sometimes it's like two things in the box, but
Right.
like
They're like ability
most of the
checks,
time,
kind of.
yeah. But it's like based on your decisions. And to me, I felt like there was like almost no way of you knowing what you were supposed to do. Like it's always just sort of random chance, which I'm fine with if it's things that just like push the narrative in a direction. But a lot of times it's like blocking critical information that then makes the choosing the murderer sequence, what is supposed to be the crescendo of every act, really deeply unsatisfying to me. Because I, Chad the person, know that there is something else, and Andreas is unable to communicate that because obviously he's not a real person.
Right.
So I have this big issue with that. The one that I hated that made me at least think about this was there's one in the bar. So I chose to buy a round of drinks for everyone at the inn. And you can have a conversation with these like hoity-toity scientists. And one of the guys who's there is Werner, who's the dude who witnessed the murder. Not the murder, he was like first on the scene. He's like the town doctor. And Werner hates you. And Werner is apparently in Act 1, but I just either never spoke to him even one time or forgot about him because I did not know who Werner was. But he plays a big role in the second act. And every time that you talk to him, he's a piece of shit to you. And when I got up from that conversation, he was like stepped aside and was going to talk to me. And I failed checks because I did not do a bunch of things in the conversation. And the things in the conversation were like, basically pretend that you only know German, act like a dumbass, and prostrate yourself at the altar of Werner. And I didn't know that there was going to be a check. I assumed that the conversation would be the thing that gave me information, not that the conversation was an obstacle course designed for me to get through to get to the information I needed. And what they want you to do is deduce that because Werner hates you, you want to make yourself look like an idiot in front of his friends so that he then will warm to you and give you the information. Which one, socially speaking, makes no sense to me.
Right.
You're like, oh, this is my idiot friend. I just had him waste a bunch of your time, like shoving his thumb up his own ass. And then he walked away. And then you're like, I love that guy. I'm going to go talk to him about stuff. But there are lots of them that I can't even figure out how they expected me to deduce that I still don't know what they wanted me to think of in order to get the end result. Like, I really didn't like that mechanic. Not like as a mechanic, but just how it was done in the game. I wish that there was like a warning. I feel like we've played a game like this before that was like, this conversation is going to be like, here's your goal.
Right.
Like a Danganronpa or something.
This action will have consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel kind of two ways about it. Because I kind of like the touch of realism that there's kind of just like a social clout game. Like, you're going to be able to get information from some people and not others. But yeah, I do see how it's kind of like unsatisfying as like a gameplay mechanic. Yeah, because like there were like for me it was like the beginning of the game I failed a couple, and then I feel like in the middle of the game I was like on fire. I was like passing them all, and then like the last chunk of the game I failed them all. You know, like
yeah.
So it was kind of like a sandwich for me, a bad good sandwich.
It's kind of like a classic bad good sandwich.
Classic. So yeah, like so it can feel like a little like a slap on the wrist, or like I don't know, kind of a little out of nowhere, or like put a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth when you're like, especially because it's like a random roll. Like if there's like 4 of them and you've done like half good and half bad, and it's just like nope, fuck you. That can feel a little bit shitty, but I don't know. Like I think in the end, like the way the narrative's handled, the information isn't quite as important as it actually seems. So like maybe that's why like they kind of did it that way, but then like to like the player, it doesn't really land. So
You know, yeah, because for me, what it is like, and this is, I think, one of the big differences between it and something like Oberdin, which I guess, just going to keep comparing it to, even though they aren't that similar.
no.
The thing that makes Oberdin's puzzles good is that they have correct answers.
Yeah.
And so you can think about the facts and you will know if the thing that you chose is the correct thing when you actually solve it. Now, one of my favorite games ever made is Her Story, a game that doesn't ever tell you the answer, and is open slightly to interpretation. And so I think there is a place for that. But I feel like in this game, like, people accuse, like, at the end of the first act, like, I accused Lucky of being the murderer. The stonemason.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And from that point until the end of the game, people would refer back to that time as being like that time that you got Lucky killed, which is a guilt trip that I think works if there's a correct answer. If you can know Lucky did do it, or no, he didn't do it and I got it wrong, then the emotional effect of that is completely different. But because you don't know that, it now is just annoying that everyone keeps bringing it up. And you're like, okay, like I did, and maybe I thought I had enough information, maybe I didn't, but at the end of the day, like, I feel like I don't know if I like was playing the game correctly, I guess. Like, maybe I just need that validation to progress in this game. But I was also just sort of like, and we can talk about this much later, do not feel the need to go down this road right now. But like, these are the things that I was able to sort of connect with in the game because I was disinterested in most of what it was presenting me. I really liked the ideas of like this big narrative, and the fact that I don't know if I was doing well or not means that I just like, I don't know, I just felt it very unsatisfying.
Yeah, I do think that's kind of the failing of the game, a little bit, that like it doesn't really like communicate or make it clear, I think, to everyone like what like the fun of the game is. 'Cause, like I think it's like it's not like a like typical murder mystery game where like the goal is to solve the murder and all the clues are there and your job is to find them all and solve it. It's more about like just experiencing like the world and the characters, I think. Like I think it's more like just like a narrative focused thing. So yeah, like if you're someone who's like more mechanically minded like yourself, you might like bounce off the fact that there isn't a concrete narrative to solve. And if you're more of like a narrative fun time guy, like me, you might not even think about it.
A narrative Nancy.
Narrative Nancy, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that there are games where I think that it succeeds for me in that way. And this just isn't one of them. It was, it was set in the past. So, like, we knew it was fighting an uphill battle from the very beginning. But yeah, and that's really it, I think, as far as, like, that mechanic rubbed me the wrong way because I was really hoping for, I guess, more of an Oberdin thing, which isn't what the game is going for. And honestly couldn't live up to anyway, so it's probably a good idea that it didn't go for that. So like there's that was sort of my gripe going through as far as the mechanics go. Otherwise, I think it actually, the way that the information is doled out to you outside of those events, I think is actually really interesting. I'm glad that the world that you navigate is very small. It's got the Resident Evil 1 mansion kind of vibe to it, where during the first act, you're always discovering new things. And then during the second act, you kind of have, there's recontextualization of some of the areas that you already learned, but you have like a mental map. And so when fucking brother Adok is dying of consumption, I know who to talk to because I've been introduced to all of these characters. I was like, oh, right. This guy's the doctor monk. And then he sends you to go talk to the herbal nun. And so there's like Gertrude. All of this back and forth. Gertrude, yeah. And going back and forth there was really cool. Like I liked it. Like I felt like it built out Tessing really well.
Yeah. You get that satisfaction of building the mental map. And like I was surprised how late into the game like you were still like finding a new area every once in a while. It's like, oh, we finally get to go into the aqueduct. Like, oh, we finally get to go like beyond that tree in the woods. That was like, there's certain things that are set up like well in advance. Like in the first act, I think it might be like at the end of the first day when you're leaving the abbey, you like see a ghost. Like on the aqueduct, and that's like way later in the game. You find out like what that was. I think it was Guy was like traversing the aqueducts, or at least in my playthrough. Maybe that can change who that is.
That was probably Guy, but I didn't ever get there.
But I just think like that's all really cool because like that's paying off way in the third act. And like there's all these like little crumbs. Like if you go down to the aqueduct and you see the drawings on it, and then you can find out the little story about how the son of the guy who runs the mill like wants to be an artist. He doesn't want him to, and then like blah blah blah. You come back to the aqueduct later and you overhear the conversation. You're like, oh, I'm behind that wall. You instantly know where you are. Like when you're hearing the voices from outside, you're like, oh, I'm like right below the mill. Like all these like little pieces come together, and I think that's like a real strength of like the scope of the game, I think. Yeah, and like the quality of like the narrative writing.
Yeah, no, it's extremely good. And like the narrative writing plus like the world building, and honestly, I think they did a really good job of like putting you near spaces like within the context of the game. It'll be like, oh, like this is the time when I have to go to work, but this guy says, hey, go check out the Walmart, whatever. And so you're like, well, I'll swing by Walmart on the way to the Abbey. And you go there and it's like, oh, and right next to that, like, oh, that's Old Man Jenkins' house. So I'll pop in and see what he's up to. So you have a conversation with Old Man Jenkins, and then eventually you get to work. But it just in that like brief period, you have been like many opportunities for exploration have been put in front of you. And so you get to see all of these things in order to set up the payoffs.
Yeah. And if you're smart about it, you can gain like a ton of information in that time, like when you're on the way to work.
I think the very first and maybe only question mark thing that I Googled in the game was I was just like, at one point it was just like, these are your leads, go follow 3 leads. And like, but every time that you follow leads, time passes. And I was just like I think I can't remember what my query was, but it was like, it showed so hard my misunderstanding of what the game was at the time. Cause I was just like how much time passes or something. Like I was like trying to figure out like mechanically speaking, like if I did something, like have I been wasting time before that talking to people? Like should I just be running to objectives because there's like a timer like fucking Majora's Mask going on in the background? And no, there isn't at all. There are just like major events that you have to choose between like a limited number of them that you can do. But yeah, I think that was one of those things where if I had known more about the game going in, I would not have had that like question at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think like that's relatable. Like, there's definitely moments like that, like overwhelm you in that way. Like, I feel like before picking like the person who like the murderer in the first act, I was like, oh shit, like I need to like pause the game for a second and be like, I've got like 8 pieces of evidence against one person and only 2 against everybody else. It seems like he's the guy, but like I don't know. Like you have like this moment of like, this is going to be unreversible. Like, do I like fucking double check, something or? So I think that's relatable.
Yeah. And that was like, because that was the end of the second act. Like, to me, if it was a her story kind of situation, right? Where it was more of like you believe this to be the truth, which I guess it kind of is like that.
It is
and therefore,
like that till like to the end, kind, which we'll discuss later.
Right, yeah. I am aware of the ending of the game.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not, you won't be spoiling anything. But yeah, going to like the end of the second act, I felt very satisfied in terms of like my actual choices. Like I found the person that I thought actually did commit the murder. And I fucking ratted on Brother Guy, which did make me feel bad. And I was like, I didn't think Brother Guy would have been the murderer.
I did.
Because Brother Guy to me seemed like a spineless piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just said, I told the fucking, the abbot about the fact that he was, doing satanic rituals and embezzling from him.
Right.
And I was like, that's probably enough. Like, Guy's gonna get fucked for that, for sure. And then also accused the person that I thought was actually the murderer. And so I was like, that's good. I have that in a nice package. But the first act, I was like, I don't know, Lucky's like a strong dude.
Yeah. What was the name of the guy who was like in charge of all of the other brothers in the Septorium?
Oh, yeah, Severus Snape.
Severus Snape, because he's the guy who I accused
I don't remember
in
his
the
name,
first
but yeah.
act. He was doing the satanic rituals. Because like as I said, I found like 8 pieces of evidence against him and only like 2 against everyone else. So I was like, it's got to be him, right?
I do suspect that if there is a right answer, that might be it. I found no information about him.
Oh, really?
He was in fact not even one of the options that I had.
Man,
I felt
like the game was throwing evidence about him, which goes to show you. Like, I feel like a second playthrough of this would be like very different.
Yeah, you would definitely, like, especially knowing that, right? Like, you would probably go in saying, like, what if I followed these different leads and didn't, like, focus on one particular person?
Yeah, I was looking through the achievements, and there's an achievement for seducing one of the nuns. Is like
I got that one.
Sisters, whatever her name was,
Zadina.
I was like, I don't think I even saw her all of Act 1. I was like, I didn't even met this character. And it's like she's like has like a small role in Act 2, and I was like, oh, and like I couldn't interact with her. I'm like, I bet you had to interact with her in Act 1 to do that, and I just didn't ever see her.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, no, yeah, I got the achievement in Act 1. I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, I just completely missed it.
Yeah, you had to interact with her one time, but hysterically it was through a door with a little sliding eye hole.
Right, like a confessional.
She's the first person she's the first person you talk to in the library. And then she goes and gets Illuminata.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and then that's the rest.
Okay, so then I did talk to her, but then completely forgot about her.
Yeah, I forgot about who she was entirely as well until later, and they like implied a history, and I had to think back, like, where did I meet this person? But also, I did take the background that was like, was a drunk asshole background. It was, and that, man, there's a lot of dialogue that comes with that. Let me tell you.
I bet it's kind of like a Disco Elysium. I feel like there were certain like traits you could take that would like give you goofier dialogue options.
Oh yeah, and being drunk all the time is definitely one of the options in both games. Yeah, and honestly, I don't regret my decision there. Like, it was taken at a time when I had no idea what the rest of the game was going to entail. So I just went with the like most flippant, like stupid option and just kind of rode with it. And I think they do a good job of integrating that. Like it's not like I took the joke background.
Right.
Like there were a lot of places where it was relevant. And it was cool because of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what equivalent thing I would have taken. Like what choice I made, yeah.
Yeah, you make like a
there's a
choice
bunch of
about
them
like where
throughout the
you're
game.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you make like two background choices that are about like your demeanor. Mine were logic man and drunk man. And then it was like what you studied, which I took medicine and fuck something else.
And fucking.
And oration. Yeah,
Right.
and fucking. Yeah.
I think I took oration as well. Or was it
That one seems to make the most
Yeah.
sense, right? Like if you were to play this game in the form of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, you wouldn't roll up with like a 17 strength barbarian.
Right.
You would be like maxing out on your charisma.
in
So orator
intelligence?
just seems like
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Is it break?
But yeah,
is
and
it
I mean
break
that's
down?
another great. Yeah, it
Oh,
could
I
be.
mean,
Yeah.
Continue.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that actually is a great like. I think that they implemented that system really well as well. It's another thing that I thought the game did a good job with.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because like it really made me stop and think. I think it's an accomplishment how much it like made me take that stuff seriously. Like I like sat there. I was like, which one would make the most sense? Like what would aid me the most in like the most social situations? So. And yeah, they do come up a lot. So like you feel like rewarded for picking the ones that you picked a lot of the time.
Right. Or in my case, punished severely because I took the being a guy who studied medicine, and then in my conversation with the doctors, when I had relevant things to talk about with them, was apparently a detriment to the conversation because they wanted me to act like a dumbass for some reason.
Oh, I'm glad that you did that because that was the one errand I didn't do on that day. Because
Yeah,
I thought I might be able to.
I skipped.
I was trying to cheat the system. I was like, maybe I can come back to the bar at the end of the day and they'll still be there, and I can like go to
yeah.
So I saved that one for last and could not do it.
Yeah, the one that I ended up not doing was the listening in on the confessionals.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Which, as it turns out, based on the
Very
last act of the game,
relevant, yeah.
probably would have been pretty relevant, but I just paid no attention at all. Yeah. I know we only have a limited time to collect evidence about this game, but it is sexed, which means that we should take a break.
Yeah. Amen, brother.
Amen. And we're back. All right. We talked a little bit. Well, we talked a bit about how the game is structured and like the mechanics and stuff like that. I think one other thing that probably bears discussion for sure is more in the presentation of the game. I want to talk about sort of the setting and things like that, but the game also has a like a hand-drawn art style. Which I think I do appreciate a good bit, especially considering that this is a game that focuses on a character whose chosen profession is art, even if he fucking hates it in the second act.
I'm a big fan of vector art or like line art as opposed to like pixel art in games. Yeah, there's really good use of it. It kind of mimics like medieval like wood cuttings and like manuscript illustrations and stuff, much like the stuff your character is making in the game,
Right.
as you alluded to. It's really cool. Like I think it really adds to the atmosphere. It looks like art produced at the time that it's set in.
Thematically speaking, there like all of the because there's a lot of text in the game, and they have this sort of like glossary system where if there's a term that they suspect you might not know, you can like click on it and it will zoom out and show like a book as like this is being told as a story, etc. And there's like all of these like illustrations lining the pages that are in the same style. And so there's a lot of like both the game itself is within reason trying to mimic the style of art that is of the time, but there are also just loads of actual examples of this sort of style of like, I presume Germanic like artistic tradition in this era. And it's very cool. It's honestly probably for me it is like the best part about the theming. I really like this like the style that it goes for and the fact that it actually does play into the narrative, and I like the more abstract elements as well, being sort of, I don't know, like the menus and all of the things that pop up in the glossary and everything like that. Just like those really brought it home for me. I thought that stuff was very cool.
Yeah. Did you use the text like accessibility feature?
I didn't.
Okay, I was wondering whether or not you would.
I probably should have, because there were some things in there that were tough to read. I did solve the problem a little bit. I thought this would make it worse, but it didn't. I played a lot of this game on the Steam Deck. And on the Steam Deck, like when I'm holding the fucking screen 2 inches away from my face,
right?
It's pretty easy to read everything. But there were just certain styles that were harder to read than others. But it is also like, that's a thematic decision. That's an artistic decision.
Yeah.
And I did like it, and so I wanted to read it. I do want to call out, since you brought it up, one thing that I fucking hated, and this might just be just some malfunction with the way that my brain works. There's like a thing that the game does where on occasion a letter will be written wrong and then it gets like erased and put the correct letter gets put in. There isn't voice acting in this game, so you're reading all the text. When I see that, I get hung up on it. Like, if it's obvious what the word is, then cool. But, like, sometimes it will make a new word. Like, it'll just be, like, a typo where it's instead of pound, it says mound. And you're like, I, like, read it, and I go, that doesn't seem right. And I just fucking stare at it until it corrects it. And, like, I know it's wrong, and I can probably figure out what it's supposed to say. But my brain will not let me move on from that word until it gets fixed. So it would like halt my progress for a second. And I don't really get that one is while annoying to me and probably not to anyone else on the planet, was one that I just didn't know why they chose to put it in.
Yeah, I think it's just supposed to be like that. It's like it's actually being handwritten by the character that's speaking. Like, because
right.
like different characters have like different like typefaces. So like the like villagers will have like a messy scrawled typeface, but then the monks will all have like the Gothic script, and then you know like the dignitary as well, like a nicer kind of like serif type font, etc., etc. So yeah, I think it's, and then like a really cool detail was like it'll like simulate the pen running out of ink. Like it, like a sentence will like start to like fade out, and then like the next sentence will be like dark black again, like they like dipped their pen back in the, or their quill back in the ink. Which is really cool.
Yeah, and anything that's like yelled or emphasized has like some splatter around the word.
So yeah, they really go that extra mile to make it feel like the character speaking is actually like writing it, which is cool. But like, yeah, I think my brain worked the exact opposite with those things. Unless it was like really egregiously different. Like I would like just read it like what was intended, like without even thinking about it a lot of the time. And then would like finish the paragraph and it would change, and I was like, oh. Like I didn't even like notice a word was spelled wrong. Like if it was one of my words, just like one letter was off, like my brain just like auto-corrected usually.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm like that, but that is 100% like what, when I saw the thing like swap over, I was just like, I just had to wait for it,
Yeah,
or
no,
like
I'm sure that's
consciously tell myself to move on.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I was like, just keep going. You know what the word is.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of people also would be annoyed by that.
Yeah, including me.
But it is
But
really
otherwise,
cool, though.
yeah, I do really like the different effects that they put on it, which is why I was hesitant to turn it off. Right, like I didn't want to have missed like these decisions, especially like there are a few of them. Like when you discover that the two Jews who were visiting Saul, one of them in conversation learns that, or you learn that they are also a printer, and so they get their text swapped to the like typeface, like imprint style. So it was cool. Like it shows like that these are the like this is how Andreas sees the characters essentially.
Right.
Like it gives you an additional bit of like information on them. So yeah, I did. I really liked that particular like choice, even if like they had to implement an accessibility option because it can be hard to read.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting it puts that on Front Street. I feel like more games should do that. Like, like when you boot up the game, be like, this game has options. Go check them out. Because like a lot of the times, like you don't even think to do it with certain things.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I was ready to turn it on. Like I wanted to leave it, but like as I know, like when I played Lunacid, when I was like playing it on the couch, if I left it on like the default settings, like the text was too pixelated and I couldn't read it, so I had to like switch it to clean mode or something like that, so I could actually like, fucking read what it said. But with this game, I didn't have to worry about it. Like I think all the text was big enough. Like I think they did a really good job implementing that. Like it was all like completely legible, like 99% of the time.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I did once again though I did play it on the Steam Deck, which did make it easier. And honestly, I didn't have that much trouble when I was on PC either. But either way, like it was, I think they implemented it well enough that it was readable. Like as somebody with a visual impairment, like I thought that I was capable of getting through it, like without using the option, but I do appreciate that option was there. There were times that I was like, I should turn this on, but normally it was because it was like 3 a.m. and I was like tired.
Right.
But yeah, and that's just like the commitment to the thematic elements of the aesthetic, I think was maybe my favorite thing about the game. Just like the fact that they did so much to sort of like keep it within the sort of artistic genres that would have existed at the time. And to make it like a part of the story. Like the fact that he's an artist is important. The fact like all of the people that you interact with in the first, like in the Abbey in the first day are artists, with different sort of like perspectives on how they treat their art. And the printing press is like a big thing as people sort of work out the woodcuts and how we're going to get illustrations onto our pamphlets that we're making. Like all of that kind of stuff, like it is so gloss overable, but is also like the most important thing to this narrative. And debatably some of the most important things that were happening at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very good to see that stuff.
Yeah, like it's like a nice touch that like the maze or the labyrinth that he sees in his dreams, in the few dreams, is like a piece of art that's like in the church. Like the way that they weave in like the details like that. Yeah, it's like it just creates like a really rich atmosphere. Like I imagine like the medieval peasant town and like the church that rules over it was like boring to you as a setting.
Yeah.
But like I felt like the like religious theming and like exploring the Abbey and like learning about it and like how it affects the townspeople, and like it dropped me into an environment that was like familiar enough to me, but like foreign enough to me as well, that I felt like it was like really satisfying to learn about. It was like one of the things that really sucked me into the game, and I didn't know if you had like a a similar or opposite experience to that.
Yeah, it was more. So for me, it's like, what is the way to put this? Like, that doesn't make me sound like an idiot, an ignoramus, right? Like, that's kind of the big thing. I don't have much interest in history and never have in my entire life. And just have largely avoided it. Not like actively, but just I don't actively seek it out. So when I'm presented with something like this, it's always like, where is the line? Like, what is it that is going to be interesting about this? And I do like some of the themes in this. I like the, like, I don't know, like the overall narrative of this game is sort of about, is less about the murders and more about this idea of like, actions and consequences, like people versus authority. And that goes as far as religious authority, including like people's relationships with God and people's relationships with like the governing bodies of the peasantry of, when is this set, like 1400s Germany, like
Something like
very
that.
like, yeah, it's like a fairly specific point in time, but a lot of the themes in them are interesting and are largely universal. Like a lot of people today are still religious and have a difficult time sort of like justifying that given the actions in the world around them. And I think that theme is like explored in this, and I think that is interesting. But I just get very bored with to me it's a lot to do with dialogue. It's a lot to do with scenery, and it's a lot to do in this game particularly, and not generally speaking, with the audio. All of these things sort of like either bothered me or put me to sleep. And like the the dialogue for me is the worst offender, not because it's poorly written, because it isn't. It's actually very well written, and characters have distinct voices, which is always something that is difficult to pull off when you have this large of a cast. So I think they did a very good job of differentiating characters, but the fact that they speak sort of in this like very plodding, God bless you, Andreas, like, let's have this and then we gotta say grace before we eat dinner stuff, like, it's so very slow and full, and obviously it's full of proper nouns that you have to then go read a glossary to like get if there's even the faintest possibility that there's a connection at all. Like, I don't remember most of the stuff that I read in the glossary as it came up. So like, that's the thing that puts me off from these kinds of stories. Like, historical dialogue, whether it's written accurately or tries to be entertaining like it does in this game, like, just bores me to tears every time. And then looking at like this is real life, right? Like, I have an understanding of what real life is. So as I walk by like a busted down peasant shack 53 times in a row in a game, like, it just doesn't have the same impact the 53rd time. Like, I was very tired of walking around and there never being anything new for me to look at. And then this is the fastest I've ever turned a game audio down to like 2 before in my life, because I spent the first like 40 minutes of this game is just chickens clucking and like a bird occasionally going like, ah, and is so irritating. Like, it literally gave me a headache within the first 20 minutes of playing this game because of the ambient farm sounds. So like, I was set up to be so annoyed by this game, and the fact that I came out with a positive opinion even though I didn't enjoy it should be all you need to know about how good the game actually is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I very quickly was like, I'm gonna fucking hate everything about this game within like almost immediately.
Yeah. I did not mean to grill you on your dislike of history, but I'm not a big history buff either. Like, history is probably like my least favorite like standard school subject. But like,
Right.
I don't know. I felt like And I do have some of the same kind of like, are they going to do the historical dialogue really badly and it's going to suck kind of thoughts. But I thought they did it like pretty well. Like it all felt like pretty accessible and entertaining to me. But
Yeah, I agree that it's definitely done.
yeah, I didn't think twice about it
accessibly.
after I like settled in.
Yeah, I think that's what they want. Obviously, like when you're writing a story like this, like you want it to be, you want a modern audience to be able to like read it and not have to like Google every word because you're using like some foreign dialect, and like some people do this. Oh, it's like, it's historical accuracy. We got to keep like, that's not what this game is very not douchey is how I would describe it.
Put it on the back of the box.
Yeah. This game is very chill and cool with it, but it's just like, it's never going to be subject matter that particularly interests me. Like we did a book in our book club that we do outside of this podcast.
That's like
that
a book club.
that is like a book club. And I remember saying like, I think this is up for Redwall, where I was like, this could be the greatest children's literature, like that is set in a fantasy world about a mouse, and I would still not care because like it's just never gonna be a thing that I'm like into.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how I feel about this. It's like, you can, if you're gonna write a murder mystery about a prehistoric, that's
Prehistoric. Set in prehistoric Germany.
yeah, in prehistoric Germany. Roughly 1400 years after the death of Christ. Prehistory. And like old Europe, like I'm just not ever it's gonna be difficult for me to connect with it.
Yeah, I think we all have our versions of that. Like for me, it's like stuff set in like a city or like a very boring real world location. Like
unless that city is in another city.
Right, yeah. Unless it's the city in the city. Yeah, or like the PS3, Xbox 360 era shooter where they're all set in like a desert that looks like the most boring shit you could imagine. That's the thing I can't really get into, so.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like that, like I said, like this is like one of those things, like if you listen to the podcast like long enough, you can definitely put together like there's the Chad sinkhole paradox.
TM.
Yeah, if you're updating the wiki, get ready on this one. If I really like a game or I really dislike a game, I'm going to like try and skew my discussion about it with more positive comments or negative comments to move it toward the middle.
Right.
Because I don't want to come in, because it feels dismissive to me to come in and be like, oh yeah, this game was great. I've been having insomnia lately and it put me right to sleep. But I considered saying that, and then did in this context, because it is like, I want to give the game its due, especially considering the fact that I do think this is a very good game. But then, on the other hand, like if I really like a game, I don't want to come off as just like having nothing bad. There have to be criticisms toward it. So, yeah, like I didn't love it, and the aesthetic and the setting are most of why I didn't love it, and so I don't want to be too harsh.
Right. So one thing I thought was interesting is like the progression of the 3 acts. Like you start at the beginning, like living in a shack with probably the poorest family in the town, which I thought was interesting that they're the ones that took you in, like the ones that can afford it the least.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And then I thought it was really. We can come back to this in a minute, so bookmark this one. But like, you start the 3rd act playing as, what was her name? Magdalene? Yeah. And I was like, who? Like, I did not remember her like hardly at all. It took me a second to be like, who is this? I was like, I thought like Ursula like the little girl from the house that you starred in would have made more sense, but like they tie it in thematically and blah blah blah. But I thought it was jarring
Right.
at first. But yeah, so you start out in that town, and then like there's that juxtaposition when you come back in the second act, and you're like rich now, and you stay at the new inn on the in the town, and like
Oh, do you?
oh, can that happen differently?
Yeah, I think because I ended the first act, I get an achievement.
Oh,
for
were
it.
you
I
in the
ended it-
Abbott's good graces?
I was in the Abbot's Good
Oh, I
Graces,
was
so I
not.
stayed in the guest house.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
So did you actively engage the dude about Martin Luther's ideas, or it like during dinner, or did you do something else to upset the abbot?
Oh, I just
That was the most tempting for me.
I think the thing that put me in his bad graces is just that I accused someone from the abbey of the murder.
Oh yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, like both of them. Like in the first act, it was what's his fuck, the occult guy, whose name I don't remember, and then in the second act, I accused Guy. So
Right.
both of my murder suspects were the brothers at the abbey. So yeah, basically, like from like the whole game, the abbot didn't like me.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it was weird. Like for me, it was always weird because like I basically never agreed with him, but I did not side with Lorenz at the dinner table, and I didn't get any of the people in the church murdered.
Right.
So Fenric, that's the
Fenric,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's enough. He's a more chill guy than you would think, honestly.
Yeah. And I don't think I sided with is it Lorenz?
Yeah, Lorenz.
Yeah, I don't think I sided with him at the dinner. I think I was like I played the mediator, but that wasn't enough to get on his good side.
Right.
I didn't suck his dick enough.
Yeah, I did. I loved my interaction with him because not with the Abbot, with Lorenz, because like in the beginning of the game, he comes in and he like takes a particular interest in you, and so you get this like big build up of him like becoming more and more friendly, and then he gets murdered. And so I had all of these experiences, and then like the one time that I was in public with him, it gives you the option to just call him by his first name, which I thought was hysterical and went with. And everybody was like, whoa, oh, he's offending the Duke or whatever. And then he died, and then I was able to just go around to everybody and be like, I hated that guy. That dead guy, he sucked. Nobody to prove me wrong on this one. So that was good.
Yeah, like, I like the dynamic they had with him. Cause like he comes in and like puts all these like temptations on the table for you, and then I feel like in the second act, or it's what's his name from the mill, you can go hunting with him. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of a similar thing where like somebody like takes you aside and is like, hey, like we could totally fuck shit up. Like Apple anyone?
Yeah.
So like, I thought that was kind of cool that like each act kind of had like a wild card character like that.
Yeah. I did go hunting with Mueller.
Yeah, me too.
I was kind of wondering if, like, in classic adventure game fashion, there was going to be a way that he would just kill you on the mountain, and then the game would just end. Which would have been pretty funny.
Yeah, that would be clever.
Though I guess the game wouldn't have ended. The Act 3 could have still happened.
Right. Did you have an apprentice when you came back?
Yes.
Caspar. Casper? Okay. I was like, maybe that could be different too. Who fucking knows?
That's sure, yeah. It's possible.
Like, so I really liked Casper, or Caspar, however you want to say it.
Yeah, it's probably just Casper.
I feel like it gave me like perspective. I thought it was interesting to give you a basically like silent observer, because it makes you like question all the decisions you make a little, because you're thinking about him watching you and like absorbing like what you're doing. So I thought that was really interesting to introduce in the second act, like a conscience. Like you get a little Jiminy Cricket. So So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then like I really like was expecting to play as him, like when Andreas dies at the end of the second act. I really thought you were gonna play as him, but then third act twist, Caspar died in the fire, which is lame. But
Yeah, well, I think it depends because
or
there's
at least in my playthrough.
Yeah, Caspar was not there when the fire happened for me.
Yeah, I sent him away, but it says that he like whenever it's revealed Andreas is still alive, he tells the story. And he's like, "Oh, like Caspar came back for me and he died in the fire."
Okay. Then that definitely probably happened for me as well. Because I failed the check that Caspar would leave because I didn't know it was going to happen and I was too nice to him, apparently.
I was also very
You needed
nice
to be
him.
mean. Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, that was one of the more unsatisfying things about Chapter 2 for me because there were so many great sex jokes I could have made from my
But a child
background.
was present.
But I was like, I don't want to do this in front of the kid. I mean, I slipped a few in that I thought he might not get, but it was
Most of the
it
kids
yeah,
just don't.
don't get.
But yeah, no, I think that was a really cool curveball to throw.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there were a lot of things that I mean, yeah, and I think that's probably like that's one of the things that most. This is the good way, by the way, of trying to set up a situation where a player would want to play your game again, because knowing that there was a check and that I could do things differently and it would have saved Caspar's life is much more compelling than saying like, hey, there's another ending where fucking aliens abduct you or whatever. Like some like weird other thing. Like you're just like, do you want to just play the whole game a second time so that you can get a different ending? Like, no, not really. This one gives you like sort of an intrinsic motivation to do that, which I think is much better. Because yeah, I do wish that I could have saved him. Now that I know that he died,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah.
to you. Honestly, I would have liked to have just gone back to before you told me that.
Yeah, and it's like a interesting. I don't think they do anything quite as much as I would have liked, because it parallels the death of his own son. So I don't know if you got to this part in the story, but like after Act 1, he goes and gets married to like his betrothed wife. And they have a son, and the son dies. And it's caused like a rift between him and his wife, and he doesn't want to go home, so that's why he's like extending his trip abroad or whatever. And then like Caspar dies as well, so there's like a parallel there. And they kind of get into it a little bit in like a dream sequence at the end, like the final trip through the little maze. But like I feel like you could have done more with that. But like I guess that's like because it's like a third act twist. Like they didn't have enough time to let that like breathe or whatever. But I thought that was like an interesting concept that just kind of gets like thrown at you at the end.
Yeah, I didn't play the third act pretty much at all, but I know that there's a sequence, a maze sequence, one night in Act 2. Talking about it, where you're talking to your son.
Yeah, and he
doesn't
back.
respond to you. Yeah. And from a previous conversation that I had in a dream with my wife, I I put together what happened pretty much from that.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that was a thing, and I wasn't sure if it was ever going to be brought up. And I honestly kind of like the idea of it not really. Like, yeah, it comes up, I guess, in a dream sequence, but it explains a lot of sort of like... Because Andreas doesn't actually hate art, right? Like, he hates the life that he's living.
Yeah.
It's the fact that... And, like, he has excuses. Like, in mine, anyway, he would always be like, oh, the... people who are commissioning me to make this art keep wanting me to add them into it and stuff like that, which mirrors what who's Piero? Brother Piero's advice is for the artist to put themselves into the work. So there's sort of like this. He was happy then when he was putting himself into his art, but he's unhappy now that he's forced to put other people into it for pay. So there's kind of like that through line, like that Andreas, where he suffers an unfortunate life and is drawn into malaise from that. I think it's very cool. But yeah, I don't know. I never saw it really get worked into the narrative much.
Yeah, because you play most of the third act as Magdalene, and you had to take over. Like you're at the beginning of it, your father gets like clubbed over the head by who ends up being the priest, who is like the ultimate mastermind of the murder. And because he figured something out, or I don't remember why. And then you play as Magdalene, and like you're tasked with like painting the town mural to like show the history of the town. And so that's why she ends up going around town investigating. Like that's the narrative excuse for that. And then you eventually just end up finding Andreas, I think, hiding in the aqueduct, or like he's just like a weird hermit golem guy, just like
living in the ruins.
Hiding in the ruins, yeah. So you don't cross paths with him until like late in the game. So it all kind of is like a final hour like truth bomb.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, that I would have, had I finished the game, the twist would have definitely gotten the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because not only would I not have expected Andreas to have come back.
I was surprised.
Yeah, they could not have possibly made a character that I was more likely to completely overlook than Pastor Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
That guy.
I feel like I like had a moment where I was like, I feel like the priest hasn't like done anything. But then, like, I just like didn't think about. I didn't chew on it at all. Like, I feel like the seeds were there. Like, he was a little suspicious. Because there was
talked about like.
I was just say there's definitely something up with the like quarantined nun in the like little whatever side room, like self-imposed imprisonment thing. There's definitely something up with that, and I think I just had like a moment where I was like running through the town, and I'm like, there he is just sweeping outside, and then like there's like the woman in the prison. I was like, something's got to be up with that, right? But then I just moved right on.
Yeah, very much like an Animal Crossing villager sweeping up the dirt on the dirt road.
Yep. Good point.
Can't have dirty dirt.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like it's a good twist. Like I think hidden in plain sight like that. You do have a little section where you play as Andreas and Magdalene. So like it's not like at the very very end, but like it is pretty close to the end that all gets dropped on you.
Right. I will say, I don't know, I think this probably says more about me and my associations that I make in my own head when it comes to Catholic priests. But what I assumed was happening with the nun in the thing is that he was like a fucking creep ass, like molester.
I never even thought of that.
Because there were all these situations where... That's true. Well, yeah, this is like one of the rare
like,
straight priests, I guess.
Church.
Yeah. I also kept Casper out of that church, but it wasn't like a conscious thought, but maybe subconsciously.
I definitely had him eavesdrop on people giving their confessions, so I did not keep him out of the church, actually.
But yeah, like he would be like, she would have her visions, right? Which is a thing that I don't know how us as the viewer is supposed to take. Like, is this a hint of something actually supernatural in the story, or is it just coincidence or whatever? Like, oh, you hear it on the night before the murder every time. But the fact that he would be like, Andres, go. I must tend to her or whatever. And then he just send you away so that he can have the woman that he has locked in a room in the place he lives.
Right.
That just reads suspicious to me.
No, I for some reason it seemed like sincere to me. Because like,
I mean, that's true.
Yeah, like it's like a purely self-imposed like whatever you want to call it. tribulation.
Yeah.
So I didn't even think twice about that. But it does, now that you point it out, feel a little bit sinister.
Yeah, it's a little creepy
Yeah.
and weird. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, it's definitely fucking weird.
Nothing
That,
not
that
weird
anyone
about
would.
it.
And she's like, I'm digging my grave. Did you see
Yep.
that part? She's like, every day I dig a little bit more of my grave and I sleep in it.
And it's like, that's
Like-
cool.
Like some fucking weird Wiccan goblin.
She would have been really into Marilyn Manson had he been around at that time. Yeah, no, it was an extremely strange part of the game that I never really got to see much resolution from.
Yeah.
I will say there was a moment, there's like a part where Lucky, being the stonemason, is talking to Father Thomas and is like, the fucking rocks and shit in the ground are giving way and the foundation needs to be reassured from all the rain unless you're, in case the church just like falls the fuck down. And I was like, is this foreshadowing? Like, is this gonna be like the nun gets like crushed or something because I accused Lucky and so he never fixed the church? But no, it didn't happen. Would have been kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's just like supposed to be one of the things that casts suspicion on him is that like he has to like rework because in the second act, like I think a rock gets dropped on a guy or something. And he's like, because I didn't accuse him in the first act. He's like the prime suspect at the beginning of the second act because it's like, oh, like he would have been the one who could have done this. So I think it's supposed to kind of like cast suspicion on him that he's like able to just fucking club a guy to death the easiest.
Right, yeah.
Or drop a big rock on them or whatever.
Yeah, I had like my whole thing with him in Act 1 is like I had the medical background, and when we were examining the body, he was like, looks like blunt force trauma to the back of the head, and fucking Andreas chimes in and is like, would have been done with a smooth, blunt object no more than 2 or like 5 millimeters in diameter or something. Like he has like a mathy explanation for it, and like they determined like, oh, maybe they were just smashed his head into a stone with a rock or something. But you'd have to be really strong, and then they like make a point of showing Lucky like moving rocks, and I was like, strong man.
Did you find that? What was his name? The brother who presided over the septorium. He was an asshole that I
Fenric.
Yeah. He buried like a bloody, like blunt metal object in the graveyard at the Abbey.
Oh, that seems kind of suspicious. Yeah. Was there anything that would make that not the obvious murder weapon?
No.
Oh, it seems like he probably did it, huh?
That's the way it seemed in my playthrough, anyway.
When
I
came
the
back,
description that you just gave, so
yeah, in part 2, in Act 2, when if you talk to Fenric, he's like, hey, I was really angry before, but like I'm chill now. I've really reflected on the things that I've done, which probably means that he knows that he's gotten away with the murder. Yeah. So that seems like it's probably the right answer. He, like I said, he was not even an option for me.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know.
I was dripping in evidence against that guy.
Yeah. Wild. I think the only thing I found from him was that he wrote some shit in a book.
Yeah, you need that for a puzzle. Oh, that's how you find the buried thing. Like you find like a cipher, and then like you find notes he made in a book, and then like you're able to decode them, and you find out that he buried something. Anyway, that's how you find that.
Yeah, I was too busy banging nuns.
That's true.
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that.
Yeah.
Anything else? Did you also find the sounds of chickens clucking really annoying?
I can't say I thought about it, but I will honor your opinion as very valid because it reminds me of my I don't like that there's no music in Dark Souls opinion. So.
Oh yeah, I was like, I wish there was no music, and by music I mean chickens.
Yeah, I think sometimes the lack of music calls attention to itself. So
yeah.
I sympathize, but I didn't really think about it in this game.
Do we want to confess our filthy thoughts?
Yes, Father. Uh, Forgive me for I have sinned, and here are my filthy thoughts. Uh, so yeah, so this game was recommended to us by friends of ours, and I didn't look anything up about it. I think the only thing I really knew about it was that it had like a medieval illustration art style, and that it had RPG elements, which did not give me an accurate idea of what the game would be like at all. So like when I booted it, I didn't look into it. I didn't do any research or anything. So like when I booted it up, I was like, oh, okay, like this isn't what I expected, and like I have some of those feelings of like, oh, it's gonna have like, is it gonna have period dialogue? Is this gonna be dry? Blah blah blah. So I had my apprehensions at the beginning, but like it pretty quickly sucked me in. I think I said earlier, like it's set in like a time period in like in the 1400s, I think. And it's like about like, it's set steeped in this like Catholic church, like this village is built on these like Roman ruins. So it's like stuff that like I'm like familiar enough with, but like it's like I don't really know anything about. So like it felt like it's like in this sweet spot where like I found it like really intriguing and interesting to like learn about. And I don't know, I just like it kind of just like sucked me right in and won me over pretty hard. Like I like, something like a Life is Strange or like a The Cat Lady. I like a cool narrative adventure game that like takes me by surprise. And I don't like this game quite as much as those two, I don't think. But like it's I think a worthy addition to that list. I really enjoyed this. It took me by surprise, and like I think it's really impressive. Yeah, like how like layered the and like complex it feels like the narrative writing is, like how much goes into it, how much stuff from the first act will come up in the third, and like how everything feels relevant, and it really feels like the possibility space is huge, and like I could play it again and it'd be like a pretty different experience. So I think they pulled that off like tremendously. It almost kind of I weirdly just thought about we played this game years ago on Pocket called Home, which is a game that like its narrative changes just based on what you do. Like whatever you do, that's canon to the story. And like it almost kind of feels like this game has that approach, but like executed at like a high budget level. Like I'm pretty sure like whatever decisions you make just become canon. And it's really interesting to see that play out in a more complex narrative. So like so I don't know. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I thought it was unique and like a pleasant surprise, personally.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. I would call this game a pleasant surprise as well. Like I expressed my grievances, and one of them I think is a valid thing, and one of them I think is just a personal thing. I didn't like this game for largely personal reasons, and also because I felt like the ways in which it gated information were kind of arbitrary and difficult for the player to suss out how to like actually make progress. And it's really those things that kept me from really enjoying it, because a lot of what this game does is actually really impressive. And I honestly kind of hate to say it, because this is a game that was made by Obsidian and published by Microsoft to a large extent. And like we've played all of these indie like adventure games, and it's like it just has the budget to realize a lot of the things that those games couldn't, because they just didn't have the time or the energy to really put in all of these different things. So to me, what this game reads as a lot is a proof of concept in a way. Like this is like, what if you had just an embarrassment of riches and could create, this is not even like a huge budget game, but just like being able to have a team of people who just write and connect events in such a way that everything that you do in this game feels like it's making an actual impact is really cool. Like, it is a very, very cool idea, and one that is executed really well. I think the writing in particular deserves a lot of respect, because the characters are very memorable, except I guess fucking Werner, who I just didn't remember at all. Maybe that's my fault. I don't know. But like, all the characters have different voices that you can definitely sort of like read into their personalities, and it gives you more of an idea of the world and the town and what their problems are. And I have to give it a shout out for having what I would describe as like pretty based politics. The game does seem to be very like, it's very like, there's a couple of gay monks who are like sneaking around, and obviously like portrays like the church's treatment of that as being negative, and the fact that all the characters are sort of given a moment to shine, and everyone has like their own little personalities, and that in the end capitalism is the true enemy. These are all like, the writing does actually put its story across really well. So I am a little upset with myself for not being able to like engage with this in the way that it actually deserved. So I would tentatively call this very good. Though if you would have to like really know me, I think, to like be able to tell if you're gonna have the same reaction to me. But if you're somebody who the History Channel is literally sleep inducing, then maybe this one's not for you. But otherwise, this is definitely a cool thing to check out, particularly if you're interested in history or just like adventure games and how they can be expanded upon. So
Hell yeah.
hell yeah. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
Oh, what will the die say about what we're playing next time?
Yep, despite the late time in May that we are in already.
Mystery Summer Theater.
Yeah, this is our Mystery Summer Theater in the middle of that. So I'm pulling up a table right now, which we're going to roll on. I mean, at this point, I think everybody should probably know how this goes. And whatever game comes up, it will be the next game that we play.
Yep. We just have like some games on the backlog, and we're gonna let a random roll of the dice dictate what we're gonna play next.
We'll let the fates decide.
All right, you ready for me to roll?
I'm prepared.
All right, here goes. 6, which I think is what I rolled last time.
You're correct. We've got 2 6s. This one is Infinifactory.
Oh boy.
A game I
feel like an idiot.
I forgot this is on the list entirely. I will probably also feel stupid.
Was it Zachtronics?
I believe it is a Zachtronics game, yeah?
So yeah, it's like a game where you essentially just build machines to solve puzzles.
Yep. From the creator of Space Chem, a game where you make chemical formulas. This is the most cerebral Mystery May of all time. If I could Quadrilateral Cowboys, like a
that
game
feels
about like computer hacking and stuff. Yeah. It's gonna be a good time. Because technically Pentiment wasn't a Mystery May title.
No, but it actually ended up being a Mystery May game, though.
That is true.
Sense.
Wow. We're really hitting all the bases.
Yeah. Really satisfying all the audiences.
Yeah. Well, we're satisfying one audience specifically, which is people who like puzzles and us sounding stupid.
So
everyone, yeah. So I will install that game. And while it's installing, you can get a hold of us. All of our... All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find links to our Twitter account, our email address, the YouTube channel, and you can listen to all of our old episodes, including ones that we did on Oprah Din and the Cat Lady, or two that I mentioned this episode.
Night in the Woods, Detention. We've done lots of adventure games, so...
We're trying to be the last bastion of adventure game lovers out there.
Harvester is a great one.
It's one of the greatest games ever made. And similar to this game, made me question religion.
That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight. Questioning my religion.
Questioning my religion. And fucking smash that like button with a no more than 3 millimeter in diameter blunt object.
Confess your sins in the comment section.
And subscribe to Otto's 12 articles. I don't think he wrote the 12 articles in the game, but yeah. Start a rebellion to not being subscribed to the No Clip Podcast. Podcast. How to start it. Let me Google that real fast.